Hey everybody, so this is day 3, and this time we are reading Acts chapter 5, verses 29 to 42. So go ahead and hit pause on this, read that, and then we'll come back for our 2 discussion questions. All right, so our first question is, what wisdom is there in what Gamaliel said? So this is in starting at verse 34. Now, we learn that he is a Pharisee, and he starts to give a reason as to why the Pharisees shouldn't kill the disciples, and he lists all of these false prophets. And basically, what Gamaliel says is, if it's from man, it'll end. But if it's from God, we can't win. So let's just let the cards fall where they may, is sort of how it sounds at the end. So what wisdom is there in that? So first off, I love that he references back to false prophets. One, because it shows that even back then, as now, there are still false prophets. That part hasn't changed. So he's referencing back to that and saying, you know what? We've seen these false prophets fail. If he's a false prophet, then his followers will fail as well. But he is also, I think, very astute when he says in verse 39, you will only find yourselves fighting against God. So we get a sense that the Pharisees believe in God, that they are at least understanding of God's power and might. Now, they've rejected, to this point, Jesus as the Christ, but they acknowledge that God is the ruler, the creator of all, and that they can't win that fight. And they think that they had solved a problem when they crucified Jesus. And I think now I'm hoping at least some of the Pharisees are starting to pause to say, well, all these other prophets, false prophets, they died and their movement ceased. There's this Jesus. His movement will cease if it's, false. So I almost kind of wonder what happened in the years following Jesus's death, because the movement, the Christians didn't stop. So did this kind of do a light bulb for somebody? Maybe this Jesus really was somebody that we probably shouldn't have killed. So yeah, there's wisdom in what Gamaliel says for sure. Second question. Could you have rejoiced like the apostles? So this is in verse 41. So the apostles, they get flogged, which is a very, very severe beating. And then, told, don't talk about Jesus anymore and go on your way. And they rejoice, the text says, that they had been counted worthy of suffering disgrace for the name. And the name is, of course, for Jesus. And by the way, it wasn't until later that followers of Jesus were known as Christians. The Acts tells us they were known as the Way. So, could you have rejoiced like the apostles? Whew. Tough question. And I think when we look at the disciples before Jesus died, we know that they all ran and hid when the mob came to arrest Jesus. So there was not rejoicing. But after seeing Jesus resurrected, there's this full 180, and they are willing to go out and proclaim and talk about Jesus. So could I have rejoiced like them? I'd like to hope so. I might be walking more than a bit slower after being flogged like that. I'm sure for me it would definitely make me rethink how I was talking about Jesus, so that wouldn't happen again. But we won't know with the disciples that isn't the case. They don't stop. All but one of the disciples are martyred, except for, of course, Judas, who hangs himself. So of the original 12 disciples, 10 of them die a martyr's death, and one by suicide. And then John, he dies of old age after writing the book of Revelation. So clearly they did a complete turnaround, and was no longer afraid of proclaiming the name of Jesus. And my prayer for me and for you is that we would have a similar faith, one that is not ruled by fear. God has not called us to be fearful, but instead to take courage, to be strong in the knowledge and the faith that God has given us. So there's our devotion for today, and hope you guys have a great day, and we'll see you later. Bye.